You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders looking to increase their club's revenue. Time for change begins right now. In the world of city clubs, Jeff McFadden is well known and well respected. As the CEO of the Union League of Philadelphia, he's developed a national reputation as a club leader. Ask GMs who know him, and they use adjectives to describe him like brilliant, visionary, and remarkable. In this episode of Crushing Club Marketing, I catch up with Jeff to learn more about his involvement in building the Union League from a club in financial trouble to a club that does about $100 million in revenue annually. He calls it accidental brilliance, but there's more to it than that. Your name has come up in so many conversations regarding just what a strong leader and visionary you are, and the work you've done at the Union League. And I know that it's difficult to talk about yourself in that way, but there was a quote that I read from Jason Straka from the Fry Straka Global Golf Course Design firm. And Jason Straka said, Union League CEO Jeff McFadden is one of the most respected general managers associated with the golf business. He's credited with vastly expanding the Union League's social and business opportunities, knowing that many of their members own a vacation home down on the Jersey Shore and or vacation there quite a bit. Jeff saw an opportunity for a second golf facility. And obviously this is referring to one of the golf clubs that the Union League now owns. But when you hear those kind of accolades and that, what goes through your mind?
Well, first of all, what goes through my mind is that I paid Jason, which is a good thing. And that's probably why he had those nice accolades about us. But what he and Dana Fry did at Union League National is just over the top. It's the Disney World of golf. It's spectacular. Opened last year, 27 holes. And no, we're proud. I'm very proud of what I did. I think a lot of what we've done over the last 25 years was accidental brilliance through really just perseverance, hard work, trying to get the right strategy and then keeping your head down and, working through what you could do.
Yeah.
And keeping a smile on your face too, that's.
Yeah. Well, you make it sound simple. And, I guess when it comes second nature, probably feels simple, although I know it's not always been super easy as most jobs are when you're there that long. But 25 years, that's a long run. And your first two jobs as I think GM in both jobs, 5 years and 3 years, which is pretty typical, right? I mean, do I have that right? Help me out with the.
Yeah, no, when I graduated the hotel school at Cornell, I went to the Cosmos Club as food and beverage manager, got promoted to assistant GM, clubhouse manager, and then my first GM job was in Denver, Colorado at the University Club, which I never thought I'd move back to the East Coast from Colorado, but I did.
Yeah, right.
When I got headhunted to the Union League at age 30. So good times.
I guess, at age 30, what did the Union League see in you at that age, especially looking back now? I mean, what's that like looking back now and, knowing what you were like then? I mean, what do you think they saw in you at that time?
Well, I think in reality, I think I was the fifth person they offered the job to. So, so you sort of.
I wish I gotta vet that one out, but yeah.
Right place, right time situation. It just worked out well. The league was struggling in the late 80s, 1990s, as Philadelphia was struggling quite a bit before Ed Rendell, who was a gregarious mayor, wind up becoming governor of Pennsylvania. Just a terrific leader, inspirational type of person. So, when I was young enough, probably dumb enough and not experienced enough to know what I was getting into, and the more senior statesmen in the club industry probably looked at the league and said, I don't want to touch it, right? It had, sort of had terminal cancer at the time. It wasn't bankrupt, but it was very close to bankrupt. But I saw that it had great bones. I saw it had a great foundation. At 30, you think you can change the world. I think I've done well in changing the league. And it was just being, again, at the right place at the right time for the right situation. And if we made a bad decision or a mistake, we were young enough to out hustle the mistake or the bad decision, right? That's,
Interesting. So what has made you successful for so many years? I mean, if you just take the years alone, that's an incredible achievement in the private club space to be at one place for 25 years. What do you think has made you successful in that role?
Well, I think the way we acquired and operate the club as sort of, being an innovative type organization now. When I did my independent study at Cornell, I studied close to 5,000 city clubs throughout the world. It was from the 15-person city club to the club that had 5,000, and you needed three things. You needed to have parking. You needed to because that gave members assurance coming in from the suburbs that they had a place to park. As you get older and you have more net worth to spend, you get a little worried about where you're going to park. The data showed that was a huge part of being a successful city club.
Yeah.
So we bought a parking garage right when I got there, and that we just doubled our revenues in less than 1 year.
Wow.
The number two thing that the greatest city clubs in the world shared was they never sold their land and built a skyscraper and put their club at the top of the building. Because eventually, after the data shows, after 3 days, the view went away, and then the elevator became a barrier to entry. There were a few clubs in New York, Manhattan, and Tokyo that bucked that trend. Windows on the World, though that was a public restaurant, there was a small private club component of Windows on the World. But truly, if you were successful, members had to walk into your club, right? So the league had that as well. And then you need overnight rooms. You have all the expenses running a club, marketing, administration, engineering, you name it. If you add some overnight rooms to the equation, the profitability or the surplus that they could throw off departmentally, at 60, 70 cents on the dollar really worked well. So I was able to run those three things when I first got there and then reinvest into the club with incredible dining, business centers, cigar bar, fitness centers, that sort of thing. And so if I look at my 25 years, the first 10 or 15 was taking that incredible foundation that the league was all about, investing in that, growing the institution. And then after 10 or 15 years, we used the profitability or the surplus that was gained to really have a longer strategic plan that we entitled Building Your Granddaughter's Club.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
And that was sort of a light bulb moment. Like, okay, are we just going to be the greatest 1965 club in 2005, right? Or, in 2025, were we going to be what your granddaughter and great granddaughter are going to want in a private club? How do they socialize? How do they use it? We started asking ourselves all those questions.
I love that. And I want to come back to that next. But if we just step back to you being 30 years old when you took that job, and you come in and buying the parking structure, and then you started. It sounds like in the first 10 years there's a lot of innovation and things moving forward. And I know that some of the GMs that will pay attention to our conversation are younger. There's definitely a trend towards a lot of younger GMs, or it seems that there is. How did you get their trust at that? And what was the mindset of the board? Were they just like, hey, we've done our homework. We know Jeff's the right guy. Let him go do it. But, there are a lot of clubs out there who are like, yeah, we'll get him in there, but we'll just tell him what to do. How do you get in there and earn their trust and really go like that?
So I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time, as I said, because of how they were struggling financially. But with that said, you can't go in and change the world overnight. You need to start small. You need to show a small victory and then capitalize on each of those victories. As they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's the way you have to do it. I think we had, coming in 1998 on the heels with Ed Rendell, being the mayor, the Republican National Convention was held in Philadelphia in 2000. We had a tradition as a Republican club, so that was really helped us springboard into reinvesting in our facilities. But I convinced them to do little things. The garage was a big thing, but we had already started putting new carpeting, new wallpaper, one dining room at a time, hiring younger, more robust, enthusiastic, vibrant servers, studying what people wanted on food menus and so forth. And we just basically started with one dining room, and then did another dining room, and then did a bar, and then bought the parking garage. And the parking garage was a struggle. It was the first assessment we had at the league in 50 years. We did not have a lot of support for it.
Yeah.
So we did wind up getting about 68% in favor of it.
Yeah.
And I think just a quick story. I was very transparent because I was sort of young at that time, so I shared everything. I still am as transparent as they come. I just don't lead with my chin, right? Sometimes the young generation thinks,
I gotta remember that.
Yeah, thinks talking so much or sharing so much is being transparent. Well, no, that's not necessarily. People want to be led. They need to be led. And you want to be transparent in everything you do. You just don't need to tell everybody everything every minute of the day, right?
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
And with social media and it just seems that's what the next generation is doing.
Right.
So we were trying to figure out, we needed to do an assessment. It wasn't very much, about $2,000 a member. And they were hemming and hawing about paying that. And one member said, "Could I get my money back at a town hall meeting?" And I said, "Mr. Grossman, you are absolutely brilliant. That's a great idea. We're going to make your assessment refundable. All you have to do is propose a new member." Yeah. And that was like light bulb went off. And we ran with that. You had to actually propose two members. You got $1,000 back for your first member, $1,000 for your second.
Oh.
This is back in 1999. And basically all the naysayers, and we still had, still 33% of the people voted against it. I would say to them, I said, "Well, you don't have any friends or colleagues or business people that you could propose to become a member of the league to help us out, to make sure," and that was on top of, all the importance of parking, obviously.
Right.
And then we were about a $7 million operation. We bought the parking garage, and I think the next year after it opened, we were a $22 million operation. So
wow.
Doubled and tripled what we were doing like that. And all it did is take the folks from the main line or from South Jersey who were uncomfortable coming into an urban environment.
Yeah.
We just assured them that they had parking.
Right.
We just said, we have valet parking. It's right next to the club.
Yeah. Safety and convenience.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
Easiest things. Wow.
So I rode that pony for a long time, Ed.
Yeah.
that parking garage, worked magic for me for the next 10 years.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that. Let's talk about building your granddaughter's club. When did you come up with that phrase? I love that. I've read that in one of the articles.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It just, obviously being a men's club for so long, over 125 years as a men's club, and we allowed women in 1986. The idea is there's so much connotation in that phrase, granddaughter, building your granddaughter's club, meaning that we're becoming progressive, more forward thinking, more inclusive. And I also got everyone thinking not about themselves, but about the next generation and the generation after them. So I think that's almost more important than the gender identification of saying building your granddaughter's club. To show and to get the culture of our members to think that, yes, we've been here 162 years, we're going to be here another 162 years. Let me not get tied up in the minutia of today, but think about tomorrow. And you see this in golf clubs and country clubs where they fight over a new irrigation system. An 80-year-old will say, "Hey, I don't want to pay for the new irrigation system. I'm not going to be here," right?
Right.
And then you say to that person, "Well, you're not paying for the new irrigation system. You're paying for the irrigation system you consumed over the last 30 years," right? And And that's the sort of the mindset that we started to, and now people are like, they're proud when we have built into their dues a capital due structure, but they're proud with the advancements that we've made, the investments that we've made, and they don't think of it as for them. They think, wow, my granddaughter and my grandson are going to love this place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little nuance, a little change.
I've not heard people position it like that. What has been your overall philosophy, and how do you share that as far as like keeping people thinking forward? Like, is there an overarching sort of, I don't know, almost like value or belief that you have that you sort of, live by that way?
It's a great question. I think it's always thinking about the future. And I tell members, and a lot of clubs do not do this. We have $54 million in debt, which people are like, oh, that's a lot of money. And then I tell them, no. And we also have $20 million in the bank, right? And if we had saved $1 per member per month since our inception in 1862, we'd have $1 billion in the bank. And so when you tell stories like that to members, and it resonates and it gets to them that you're not just here to enjoy the club, but you are a steward of the club. You are a steward of the institution. You need to think of in that capacity. And for 100 years, clubs never did, right? Matter of fact, to this day, your investment income of a 501c7 is taxable. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to tell people that they need to start a foundation, to do a charitable set aside for their foundation, do well by doing good in your community. And people, some of the greatest clubs in the world say, Jeff, we don't have any investments. We don't have any investment interests. I said, what do you mean? You're Aronimink, you're Marion Golf, you're Pine Valley. Right. You don't have investment income? They're like, no, we don't have any debt. We don't have any savings. We live hand to mouth. Right. And then we assess for when we, want to build something. And I said, I just don't think that's the right way to run the railroad. I think, you boil the frog slowly, you add capital dues monthly into your regular dues, and you always plan for the future. You don't pay off your mortgage without saving for your kid's college education, right? It's not rocket science.
Well, but why why is it so common sense to you? But I mean, so many clubs operate exactly how you just explained it.
Because they let emotion get in the way. We're all self-serving. Don't get me wrong. I'm self-serving as well. But, if you don't have the mentality that you're part of a greater good, it can easily get into, what are we spending today and how can I have the best results and the best experience at the least cost? And groupthink happens very quickly. Great leaders, can change culture quickly. And then you can get into the abyss quickly as well in that group thinking. And psychology of pricing, whether it's dues or golf fees, food and beverage, menu prices, whatever, is important to understand because people want value, right? They still want value, and you have to understand how to do that. And we're trying to ride the wave, tap into a new way of thinking, a new way to run finances, and hopefully it'll take off.
And I mean, what you're saying just makes so much sense. But let me throw a wrinkle in on this, where it's like a lot of times people will join committees at clubs, they'll join boards in clubs because they have something, they have an agenda that they are pushing, right? And they want to get, when I get there, then I'll make sure this gets done. How have you been able to manage that? Because that's such a reality that people struggle with.
Well, that takes investment, believe it or not. And here's the investment. The answer is yes. Now ask me the question. So as a club professional, you have to have the ability to take no off the table. Not that you can say yes to everything, but a lot of people get into committees and on-committee services because they haven't been satisfied by the team or by the professional folks. They weren't listened to. They didn't. More often than not, it's not one or the other, right? It's not, should we have sesame seeds on our bun or should we not have sesame seeds on our bun? And by the way, I've had that conversation at the board level, which is idiotic. You know, you have both,
Unbelievable.
right? That's the you have both ones. So
love it, right?
We always tell folks, don't waste your time getting on a committee because the answer is yes. What do you need? What do you want? We're here for you. And I train everyone never to say no. Even if you know it's impossible, you always say, let me figure it out. Let me see if I can get back to you and come up with a couple of solutions that may not get you all the way to yes, but takes no off the table.
Sure.
The other thing we do with committees, which I think is brilliant, and I stole it from the Missouri Athletic Club, and it's worked really well, is that we don't allow anyone to serve on a committee unless they have successfully proposed a member.
Oh.
Interesting. So one of the things you have, if you get a very domineering type member who wants to get on committees and has very strong opinions about something, 9 times out of 10, they have not proposed a member, because they usually have a bombastic attitude, or they're so aggressive. Nobody wants to, they're a bull in a china shop. And so we put that qualification in that you have to successfully propose the member to serve on a committee. You need to answer a whole bunch of questions, fill out an application, and send us your CV, which is another high hurdle to get over. And then we limit our committees just to 3 to 5 people with 2 professionals. So the total committee will be 5 to 7, and the 2 professionals have a vote. And we only put on committees those who have expertise in whatever the committee is doing. It always drives me nuts when you have the dentist, as chair of the Greens Committee, and he's interested in gardening, and all of a sudden he's an expert on agronomy.
Right. Right.
So we'll have, instead we'll have the person that owns the garden center, right? That's the that's the national alert we were talking about.
Yeah.
We want to make sure. So on our food and beverage committees, we have restaurateurs, we have hotel people, we have staffing HR directors who staff for hotels and so forth. So we're pretty smart. We try to put the right people in the right position. We try to push decision making down to the subcommittee level as best we can. And then, quite frankly, the answer is yes. And it diffuses a lot of the tension that you have between members. And then if you couple that with a capital dues as part of your regular dues, you don't have to ask for assessments, where you could get the tennis or racket players fighting against the golfers, and the golfers fighting against the wine people, and the wine people fighting against the fitness people, and then the older folks fighting against the younger folks who have kids, and you're putting money into childcare and baby pools and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So by building the capital into the, you hopefully can trigger projects that are the right decision at the right time. I have a woman right now who's a member. I love her to death. Part of our 10-year master plan, we are not going to build a outdoor family pool at one of our locations until 2029. And she looked at me, Ed, and she goes, Jeff, I have an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and 12-year-old. Building it in 2029 is not going to serve me any purpose, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I have to understand that. I have to, rationalize that.
Over the course of the last, since you've been there in the last 25 years, the club has purchased restaurants and golf clubs. And for a city club, you don't hear city clubs doing that often. What was behind this, and what is behind it? And is this just part of the mission and what you see going forward, for years to come?
So we were studying city clubs for a while, and back in 1967, we served 2,500 lunches a day, right? It was if you ever remember the old movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, that was the Union League, right? It was Mortimer and Randolph, Duke and Duke.
Yeah.
And so lunch was losing. The urban downtown environments were changing, becoming much more residential. The younger kids were moving in, and we started to think long term. How is your granddaughter going to use the club versus your grandfather? And we really started to just think and do some studying about trends and thought patterns. And it really dawned on us that these younger generation wanted more experiences, right? They didn't do the same thing over and over and over. Their grandfather would dine at the same table, every Saturday night, 50 weekends a year, right? At Philly Country Club, and sort of have the same menu item. Their grandfather had 5 friends. Their granddaughter now has 500 friends, right? So the way he or she socializes in a club is totally different than the grandfather, though you typically would find the grandfather on the board making decisions, right?
Right, totally.
So we had to kind of think through that. And then we thought, the granddaughter only eats out at her favorite restaurant 3-4 times a year, where the grandfather, again, ate 50 times at his or her
right, yeah.
at their favorite restaurant. And then they saying that the granddaughter wants a condo in Manhattan and a condo in Manhattan Beach. And it is more of a lock and load mentality, experience driven, versus a $10 million house, in Grosse Pointe with 10 bedrooms on 10 acres. And the next generation just doesn't want that.
For sure.
So we started to think about what could the league become, and we started to think a lifestyle club. So can we get them in? It's not just a city social lunch club, but it could be more of a lifestyle club, offering more experiences, more amenities. At the same time, we realized that because we had increased our revenues by so much with the parking garage and some of the smaller investments we've made, we realized scale was important. So not only was the next generation changing how they wanted to use the club and socialize within a club environment, we realized scale is important because clubs have just gotten downright expensive to operate. 125 years ago, in the golden age of private clubs, immigration was inexpensive. Labor was cheap. There was no environmental laws. There was no health care. So Tom, Dick, Harry, Sally could start a club back in the early 19th century or 20th century and be very well and be very successful at it. And if you look at Detroit or Boston, Westchester, New York, Philadelphia, there are a lot of clubs that were started from 1890 to 1920, the golden age. And so that hit us like a sledgehammer. That we needed to increase our top line because our expenses were very high. But we also started small. So I don't want anybody to think we had this grand strategy. Sure. We have 3 country clubs now. We'll soon have 81 holes of golf, 2 independent restaurants that are members only, that are really cool Tony type restaurants that you can't eat in unless you're a member. But it didn't start that. It was very slow. As you said, I've been there 25 years, and people say, Jeff, what you've done at the league overnight is incredible. Like overnight, it's been like the Bataan Death March. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
In some respects, though obviously we respect veterans and everyone who gave their life for this country. A quick story about our first acquisition was this little 100-seat restaurant in Stone Harbor, New Jersey, a block from the beach, called the Bungalow. And it was just truly accidental brilliance and luck. And we started very small in branching out from Center City, Philadelphia. I was staying down the shore with a board member of the league. My wife and I were staying there, and we were playing golf. It was the middle of July when Philadelphia was just completely empty because everybody goes down the shore. Yeah. And I figured that out. I didn't realize it at the time, but figured it out shortly after. This new swanky hotel called the Reeds was just built and on the harbor of Stone Harbor. So the board member goes, let's go over and have a drink after golf. So I went over there, back deck, overlooking the water with all the boats, and I run into like 20 members. I'm like, oh, Mr. Turner, Mr. Smith. Oh, Mr. Yeah. It was like, hello. And it was great. Brand new. They put like, $80 million into this place. And it was fantastic. So I said to Jules, my wife, I said, the next night, I said, before we go to dinner, let's go show you the Reeds. And we go back to the Reeds, back to the back bar on the deck overlooking the harbor. And I run into like 20 more members that were different than members that are around on Friday. And I'm like, wow, light bulb went off.
Yeah.
This is where everybody's at. And so we quickly did some data analytics, realized that over 65% of our members spend 2 or more weeks at the Jersey Shore. We then did some zip code analysis. We found that most of the wealth was moving from Atlantic County, which is home of Atlantic City, a little north of Cape May, down to Cape May County, the Avalon, Stone Harbor, Cape May area, Ocean City area.
Yeah.
And we bought a $600,000 restaurant that was in a fire sale because there was a tax lien on it, put about another $600,000 in. So it was $1.2 million investment. And it just took off. We had it, and it not only took off as a great place to eat because you can't get into a restaurant down there. Plus, you as a restaurateur, you wouldn't start a restaurant there because the season is so short. So it was a real conundrum. You couldn't there weren't enough restaurant seats from July 4th through Labor Day, but you couldn't make enough money as a restaurateur to open a restaurant because it was only a 10-week season.
Right.
We had 500 net new members join the league because of the bungalow.
Wow.
So
wow.
And after we focus grouped a whole bunch of them, we found out that they loved the Union League in Center City, Philadelphia, but they just didn't get there enough to use it. But now you coupled the bungalow down the shore in a marketplace you can't go out to eat because you can't get a reservation. And all of them said, I'm willing to join the league, pay dues, because you have Center City and the bungalow. Brought us to buying Torresdale, buying Sam Barron's, which became Union League National, to buying the Ace Golf Club and Chubb Conference Center, and buying the Guardhouse in Gladwin. So we just kind of, over the next 10 years, kept adding properties that grew our membership, our net membership. And if you think about layering that onto the thought process that your grandchildren are going to have 500 friends.
Right.
And you need scale because clubs are expensive. It just started to click. Win.
Right.
You know, and these cranky old small clubs that the kids don't want to belong to, they all want to belong to the league now. And we just changed our strategic plan to be called From 28 to 88. And that the concept is, okay, not only are we a great club, but we want to be a great club that you're a member of for 60 years.
Yeah.
So we get you in Center City when you move in after university and college. We keep you when you move out and have kids. And when your parents die, you inherit the house down the shore. We have 2 properties down there to keep you until you're 88.
Wow.
That's the concept.
That it's remarkable. I mean, and so far, no regrets?
No regrets. It's just, it's not fun for me, or not as rewarding for me as much as when you operate one location. You know, I got into hospitality peeling potatoes at the age of 10 and sort of never looked back, right?
Yeah.
A lot of, when I talk at universities across the country, they say, how did you decide to get into hospitality? I said, well, I never did. I just started working and just never stopped working, right? I didn't conscientiously think I was going to stay in hospitality. The one regret, though, is that, you know, we have 1,200 employees now. We're over 100 million in annual revenue. I miss the satisfaction of day-to-day operations. And people go, oh, Jeff, you have the greatest life. You're not responsible, but you don't realize, the intrinsic value you get from
that intimacy.
One location, right? And one, so I miss that.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. What a machine, though. It's amazing. I got to call you on this, though, because you've used the term accidental brilliance and luck in a couple of different spots here. At some point, it's no longer an accident, and it's probably not luck either. But what I'm wondering is, 28 to 88, that is something that I think that a lot of clubs would aspire to be able to, to say or to be able to pull off. And yet it's also very difficult for whatever reason, for the reasons you've talked about, as far as like appeasing the, just 2 different generations or maybe 3 different generations in many cases. And For people who are listening to this podcast who are like, how it's like, well, yeah, well, McFadden has this or he's done that, or, someone who knows, you have to, it starts with a vision. It starts with a belief. It starts with great membership, obviously, and visionary people. But for people that are listening that are struggling with how to make changes to their club to appeal to a younger membership, but also engage their aging membership, what do you say to them?
Well, you got to figure out how to bring those two groups together, right? If you want people to live longer, you got to surround them with younger people, right? And that's the easy part. The hard part is getting the young folks to, value older folks. So we look at multiple activities that an 8-year-old, and now I'm being very 8-year-old that can do it an 80-year-old. So that's that. But things like bowling, right? I mean, as silly as that is, it's a thing that a young person can do, an old person can do. Pickleball, young person do that can, and an old person can do.
Yeah.
Lectures and education, social programs are real important to bringing those young people together. I try to not to think of I'm serving a younger market, I'm serving an older market, I'm serving a club market, and try to bring the 2 generations or 3 generations together. And then keep things lighthearted and fun. The crankiest old guy, will respond with young folks surrounded around them in an enjoyable environment. Cranky old club members make more cranky old club members. So you have to just stop that cycle, right? You gotta put everybody together and try to get them to enjoy each other's company in lighthearted activities that everybody can do. You also have to be, as I say, you can't be all things to all people, but you have to offer enough niches at your club to satisfy multiple generations, right? You need to be adding pickle at the same time you're putting padel in,
Right.
You need to have a resort style pool, at the same time you need an Olympic or half Olympic lane pool so people in their 70s can stay limber and flexible. So it's not one or the other. The answer more often than not is both.
To kind of create like a win-win in that environment. I mean, is that, yeah. It just, that is one of those challenges I think so many people are perplexed with is do I have to make a decision of one over the other instead of saying, is there a way that you can actually kind of make both parties happy? But like you said, you're never going to please everyone all the time. And we all know that too.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part with the manager. One of the things I always tell members or tell other managers is I never write the member newsletter. You never see my face in our newsletter. I am not, I hope I'm the little, I am little, short and fat wizard behind the curtain. I want other folks, basically the president of the club, to take all the glory, to be the mouthpiece and so forth. So I think being here 25 years, and part of my success of being here 25 years is that I'm not front and center. I'm sort of front and center on the professional side, but certainly not on the membership side. I've never written a column in the newsletter. I never write an email from the CEO or from the general manager. It's always from the president or from a department head or from a vice president or standing committee chair. You'll never see anything from myself to the membership.
Awesome. Well, last question for you. With so many clubs doing so well, is this, I'm going to ask you a question. I probably feel like I know what you're going to say, but is this the time to really say, let's invest? Is this a time to take some chances? Is this a time with clubs healthier maybe than they were for sure before the pandemic to maybe look at some things and making changes and having a little more courage? Or is it, what's your general mindset, especially for those clubs that maybe aren't as healthy and those that are, really trying to figure out how best to take advantage of this time that is better than it was before the pandemic?
I think the time is right to create the right strategy of constant improvement. I don't think it's the right time to do major improvements unless you desperately need it. Sometimes you just need to knock a clubhouse down to rebuild it because you're going to spend, good money after bad money, so to speak. But I do think the strategy at all private clubs needs to be, we're going to have constant improvement over the next 10, 15, 20 years. We're going to continue to change and adapt and better our product. If your budget over 10 years was $100 million, well, that's obviously ridiculous. Say your budget was 10 million over 10 years. If you spent all that 10 million in year one, by year three, your members would say, what are you doing for me now? Mm-hmm. Right? I think good leadership will put a strategy in that recognize this is the best of times or one of the best of times. And it's important for us to realize that we need to have constant improvement. And that's the right strategy. So don't give them, it's like your kids, don't give them everything right out of the bat. Give it to them a little at a time. Keep them excited. Don't, if you're going to build some paddle courts, don't build paddle, pickle, padel, hydro, clay courts all in the same year. Now you say, well, Jeff, it might be easier. Well, do the master plan and then, dole it out a little bit at a time. Keep people excited about, make sure you have something going on for multiple generations, for the old folks, the middle folks, and young folks. I don't think clubs, because we always relied on assessments every 10 to 12 years to do major projects. I think if we get in that, we should be constantly improving each and every year and share that with them. I think you'll keep members, and members will enjoy your club so much more.
Jeff, thanks so much. This is so much fun talking to you today and hearing your perspective on what you've done and the industry in general.
I appreciate it, Ed. You're doing a great job. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. Jeff McFadden took the reins of GM at the Union League in 1998 when he was 30 years old. He had a little experience as a GM with just 3 years at the University Club of Denver, and he spent about 5.5 years as the food and beverage director at the Cosmos Club, a private social club in Washington, D.C. Since then, he spent his entire career at the Union League of Philadelphia. All right, so if you're familiar with the Union League, you probably know it isn't your typical city club. Among the club's assets are 3 golf courses, 2 restaurants, and a parking garage. That's right, a parking garage. That was Jeff's first big acquisition when he started his impressive run in Philadelphia. So what's interesting is that when you listen to Jeff, he makes everything sound so obvious, and he admits he's had his share of breaks, but the bottom line is that he's had to make several hard decisions about some pretty big moves. I can paint the picture for you, but it's nothing like hearing it from Jeff himself. He and I chatted in early October of 2023. And thank you for listening. If you find this content helpful, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep crushing your club marketing.